Okay. So just a little bit about the genesis of this tool. I have been doing customer driven or insight driven acquisition, retention, growth, messaging, and campaigns for 25 years. And doing that, what I've found is that there's a real lack of insight excuse me, around what we lovingly call outside in, what the customer's thinking, feeling, and doing, what their expectations are, their moments of truth and pain points, and then matching that up to what the company is doing from their service blueprint. And what you often find is that there ends up being three groupings. Excuse me, I'm going to grab some water real quickly. The three groupings, the good news of working from home, I can do that. The three groupings end up being the expectations and moments of truth that are, excuse me, not met from a customer's perspective. And then there's the things that you find that really lean themselves to internal optimization, right? The customer isn't seeing what's going on, but underwater, somebody's paddling like crazy and they're trying to fix things so the customer doesn't see them. And then finally, the most important ones where both people are impacted, both the company and the customer. So that's one of the things that we try to solve for. And what we get you to is a roadmap. So this roadmap is, I call this my Rachel Ray's kitchen, right? I've got a lot of things in here because I've been doing this demo for a bit. But what you get to is a little Lean Sigma charter of, tell me what we're trying to solve for. Give me the dependencies, the benefits, what's the ROI of doing this, steps and tasks to do it. And all this information is collected as we go along in the process of journey mapping. It also ties back to every journey map, and I'll show you that in a minute, so that you can see if you do this initiative, how it's going to impact customer effort, or satisfaction, or company ROI directly, so you can track it all the way back to a touch point. So that gives you the breadcrumbs to say, if I need to do a business case on improvement, this is where it starts and this is what happens. Make sense?
Yeah.
It also allows you to tag. So in this particular case, because we come from a consulting background and are still consultants, we have a division that does consulting. We like to look at things like people, process, information, culture, technology, user experience. And when you look at it all at once, it gets to be a little bit overwhelming. But when you can split it up either by department owning or these types of splits, it makes it much more manageable. So I'm going to walk you first through a workflow that we typically do, and it's not required. You can turn these on and off. You can use different elements. But the first thing we normally look at people starting is voice of the customer. So we know that a lot of companies do a really high level net promoter score voice of the customer pairing, and it's carefully curated by the research team to make sure that the executives are getting answers that they should, right? This isn't that. What we're more interested in are the next levels of doing some type of survey to drill into an opportunity or identify a problem. Churn might be an issue. You might be looking at issues with time in cart or whatever. And so as you're going through that, you want to ask pretty pointed questions. And if you have departments or segments, personas being the description of that segment, you can look at how well they're doing to see that things are aligned as well, or you could look at the competition. So what this does is it enables you to quickly pull all the data associated with a particular theory or a journey mapping section into one spot. So we can pull in things like text analytics and verbatim. And we also have the simple range and gap analysis that says across all of our voice of the customer, how well are we doing, right? So there's the statistical data behind it. And then the simple red, green, yellow visualization. Questions?
So far, so good.
Okay. We also do the same thing for voice of the customer through the employee. We rarely ask the front end folks, including engineers and developers, what they think of the same questions that we ask customers. And they tend to know where all the bones are buried. So asking them is very efficient. And we can compare them to what the customers are saying. So that, again, we see alignment where you might be wildly off as what you think is going on, but the employees generally have a pretty good beat on things. We also have a CX maturity question set, which think of it as voice of the equipment, people, process, information, and technology, where again, you ask questions around how customer experience is being served up, how it's being developed, and how well it's performing from a filter of the systems that you use. And this is often really edifying. And we have a little report that says, you know, here you are here essentially from a CX perspective. And it's very helpful for budding groups like yours to show teams where you are today from a strategy and an execution perspective and where you need to be. So those are the first inputs, and each of these inputs has a spot for findings and recommendations, as well as every touch point and every map. So you can start prioritizing and scoring how important each of these findings are as you go through, and you can see there's a ton. And many findings have associated recommendations, right? So if it's doing really well in the blues, no action might be needed. As you go through, things might start being a little bit less as you go on. So you can start seeing how well you're performing and look at a heat map of what's going on, right? In this case, it looks pretty good. There's not any red here. It's like green, and people are pretty delighted with this particular set of surveys. Questions? So once you've got that, we allow you to look at all of these. And again, you know, if you've got a lot of recommendations, you might want to download those into a spreadsheet and start doing something different with them, split them into different groups. And the tool enables you to do this and then prioritize it so that you can over and over start looking at different scenarios, right? So this scenario here has all of those. I could put it in a survey and look at what we're going to look at yet right now is an impact and feasibility assessment. And this then enables you to prioritize your work. So you saw the color codes there. I can assign any type of self-described descriptor here with the colors that you like as you go through, right? So it enables you then to tag each of these and then vote on them from an impact to the customer, impact to the company, feasibility to implement, and cost. And once you've done that, it then enables you to prove out your initiatives, quick wins, do next, fit in, do later, and the most important, do not. Now, at this point, you can also split them up, right? So if you want to do workshops with the different groups or whatever, you can. And you can go ahead here and move these things around as you go through so that you can then, my thumb is not working. You can move these around so that you can then identify, why is my, there, it's not moving around, huh? I don't know why it's not doing that, but it allows you to move these around. There we go. So that you can rescore them as you go through. And that then enables you to do what the CEO thinks is most important as you go through and move around, creating that roadmap. Questions? No? Okay, next step. Now, again, a lot of us do this stuff manually. The first thing we do is a word use case for every touch point. And then we do an Excel spreadsheet for prioritization. And then we do something else in a PowerPoint to be able to do that 2 by 2. We try to bring it all together for you. Now, what you're looking at now is the first of our map types. This is what we call an inventory or grid map. Along the top is the customer's life cycle, right? And then down the left-hand side, what you see here is either the channel that that touch is associated with or the department. And every touch point has that X and Y axis of life cycle and channel and department so that you can do maps on the fly. You can look at statistics. It gives you the leverage to be able to look at different elements and why those elements are either working or not. Every touch point, which is where the brand and the customer meet, it can be known or unknown. It could be planned or unplanned. There's just a ton of different data elements here. And what you're looking at the face here is the emotion at the end of this interaction. You can put some notes here, maybe the department responsible if you're looking at the channel, so you can see all three, or who's responsible for it, or which service blueprint it's associated with. It has tags, which we call descriptors, for things like moments of truth, pain points, listening posts. It shows you what personas are associated with this touch. We have a place for 6 scores, and I'll get that to that in a minute. And when you open this up, there is a wealth of information that's stored inside the touch point. So think of it as a little database. You can have attachments. They could be images or spreadsheets or dashboards or anything in the Microsoft suite. We also have external links. So I can link right, in this case, this is the landing page for the client. I can link right to it so I can see it. I could link to dashboards in tools like Qualtrics or Medallia, or if you're using an e-commerce dashboard, I can link directly to that. So it gives you the power to, again, have a lot of information in one spot. If you're using Opinion Lab, which is now what, Verify or Verity, we can pull in emotional elements. If you've got customer effort or CSAT or Net Promoter Score, all of these are self-described, right? We had to put something here. Company score might be ROI, engagement, or effort. And then it'll allow you to calculate the company and the customer score so you can see how effective this touch is. It has a place for psychographics and demographics, as well as those findings and recommendations as you go through. Questions?
So we utilize Medallia. Do you
Good.
know how complicated it is to make those connections, or how long it
Really
usually
easy.
takes?
We have an API, and essentially, when you download a report from Qualtrics, we just can show you how to configure that report into a spreadsheet, and then it uploads into the tool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like we have a little wizard that helps you do that. And once you've done it, it's set up.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So this type of map is really interesting from a perspective on understanding the total number of touches and white space, things like that. We have a little statistics module that again shows you interesting things like that scoring. It also gives you how many interactions are associated with each life cycle. People tend to focus on acquisition and forget about things like use or churn. So they spend a lot more upfront as compared to downstream when it might be as or more important. There's sentiment analysis that gets calculated for every map. Inbound, outbound, interactive, because inbound and interactive is where you make money, outbound's where you spend money. And then things like counts around those key descriptors like moments of truth or pain points. And all of these can be configured. And if you hate the icons, we can change the icons, but it's meant to be your language, not ours, right? We've just given you some elements here. And then that can be downloaded and thrown into something like Tableau or whatever, so you can look at long-term trend analysis and things like that. Okay, I'm going to jump into mapping now. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so everywhere you have an entrance, so to speak, into doing this work. We have a lot of people who have used Forrester over the years, and they like the Forrester method of sticky note management here. We can accommodate that very easily. Each of these is the same touch point as you saw before with all of that data associated with it. It just looks like a sticky note instead. And inside every sticky note, you can take notes about why. Why is this web element here a moment of truth, right? So you can take notes about why it's a moment of truth, why it's a pain point. You can take notes around the emotions associated with it. And then you can display those notes underneath here as you go through. So you can take notes about what's going on in the map as you go through, rather than having to do that with extra pieces of paper, take a picture of it and take notes everywhere. So you can expose these or hide them, depending on if you want to see how the sausage is made, or if you want the map to be really clean, right? So a lot of people start out with a map like this because you can use this for problem solving. You don't have to even use it for CX, right? It's just a brainstorming template. Other templates here, this particular template here is our built-in persona template. It allows you to pull in data from third parties around things like goals and motivations, device usage, what their people are thinking and doing. And in this particular case, this is the executive version of the key moments of truth. So that's a pretty typical starter map. We also can pull in either Visio or Lucid and visualize their maps. We also have our own drawing capabilities, which I'll show you in a minute. And if you're using something like Miro or Bluescape or Mural now, because a lot of people do, we can link directly to them, right? I can use an iframe and to link so that you don't waste time modifying it, or you could cut and paste that image in here so that you can migrate from a whiteboard, or you can start with our own whiteboard. But if you've done the work, we try to make it easy for you to transfer over. And then again, this view of a touch point has the same data associated with it as the others. We can pull in different files, images, all of that. So it makes it as a pretty robust mapping tool. Questions? No? Okay. Next map. I'm going to show you a couple more maps before we stop. This particular map here is a really interesting one. About 50% of our customers do a lot of work with their UX teams. And what we find is that while the UX team and the product managers or the UX team and the CX team are pretty well aligned, what they end up finding is that, well, this is interesting. When we look at our Google Analytics here, what we see is that people are starting to drop off this onboarding process. And at this moment in time here, we see 70% of the people dropping before they actually get to open an account. So that's call to action, right? You're looking at these analytics and it's, oh my God, we better map this. And so you can take your touch points as you go through. I've color coded some of them that are pain points here. And I start getting closer and closer to confirming my bank account and doing some security screening. And we do a little voice of the customer. People don't understand the value proposition. They're not so sure that this is secure. They're not getting responses back once they submit. So we're documented all of those pain points here. And then we said, well, let's see what's going on from the user experience. Let's look at the UI as we're going through. And Deluxe has allowed me to use this particular example, by the way. I'm not, it's the rest of the data is garbage data, but it's pretty functional. And what we found out here is just at this moment here where people are dropping off, they're asking for the bank account number and password of a person who's not yet approved and a customer. So needless to say, that's not going to work out really well. So the product manager turned to the UX guy and said, what the heck are you doing? Why are you doing this? And of course, the UX guy looked around and he said this, gee, if you look at your requirements document, you said at first possible touch, collect this information, and here it is, I'm asking for it. And so they got into a bit of a heated debate. And one of the other product teams said, don't we have a really great video with the Travaggio guy that talks about how secure we are and talks about the value proposition and our security and all of that stuff? And they said, well, yes. And they said, why don't we try moving this all down a little bit, sticking it up front here and see what happens, which of course cleared the whole problem. So we have a ton of folks that use the tool in their day-to-day design work to understand timing and cadence and messaging as well as CX. So you can be popular doing that as well. We also can add in Backstage, right? So this particular one has, they were looking at competitive products. And so we did a map, a mystery shopping map of a few competitive products along with their assets. And in this case, they use Qualtrics. So they actually had some performance metrics around the entire journey. So we just pasted those in. Again, the purpose being able to see here all the things that are going on across the continuum instead of slices of, well, how are they doing in an email or how are they doing it online? So you can see the tool is pretty versatile. We copied that same map and said, well, what's the Backstage process that's going on? So we just copied the first 3 rows of what was going on from the customer's experience, and we threw in the Backstage. And again, it also has a spot for all your findings and recommendations. We identified the systems associated with this. So this gave us a Backstage front stage and a service blueprint view. And then finally, the last couple of views were at the persona or the segment level, right? So in this particular case here, we've got the same digital Julie, and we're looking at her data around her segment. And we're looking at what's going on as she goes through her journey, right? So we're looking at the journey of what's going on. One of the premises here was a concern about how long it was taking people to onboard. And so we started tracking how long it took to get from each of these elements, right? Applying to onboarding and how many people dropped off. And indeed, it was taking up to 14 days to get from the application to approval and onboarding. And that was taking up to 5 days to make an appointment. So we looked at that and we estimated what the effort was, right? And each touch point has scores associated with level of effort. And we calculated the level of effort, which was really high, the level of satisfaction, which was really low, and the net promoter score as they got to the end, which was also very low. We also looked at number of pain points. So the tool can do counts by lifecycle element. You can look at how many people had pain points in each of these. So theoretically, if you're starting to flatten the curve here and to deal with these issues, these big problem areas, you should be able to flatten your curve and improve all your scores. And remember, I said something about recommendations. Well, here we have the recommendations that are prioritized and put in the roadmap associated with each of these elements so that you can understand here are the key things that are going to be impacting, improving both the member journey and their emotions. So it ties it all the way back. We also have a new feature. If you have a sentiment analysis tool or any kind of listening tools, we can link to those, maybe, you know, their social media or Instagram or Reddit or IVR logs. We can tie to those and create what we call a listening post and then link up and back to how you're doing that to create things like word clouds, right? This is an example of a third party that we partner with, word clouds. So we can go up and back and do that very simply so that you can keep your tab on the sentiment as you're going through as well. We can pull in data from different sources and act as an ETL. This particular one is 4 different groups, data around hold time, time with agent, CSAT score, cost to serve. So we can set that up. And every time you open the map, it refreshes. And then finally, we can also link and pull in data from third parties like ClickFox or Thunderhead, all being, and look at how well things are going from an emotional level. This is the I love it, I hate it case, right? I love it, I hate it, I love it, I hate it. The data associated with that comes from the third party. And then I've just pasted in their dashboards for color commentary. We can also set this up so it would link right back to their dashboard so that you can drill in to specific data. Okay, I'm going to breathe now. Questions? You still with me?
Yeah, this is great. Just trying to absorb it all. But one of the questions I have too, besides Qualtrics, can you link with
Dahlia,
Survey?
Confirm It, Survey
Dahlia?
Monkey. Yeah.
Okay.
You name it, we do it on that end. And on the other end, we have a RESTful API, so we can link into, again, Kitewheel or Eloqua, Marketo, or I'm missing one, Thunderhead, or any of those orchestration tools.
Okay.
This is Brighter CX. They're all getting bought by people so quickly, I'm not able to even keep up with names.
Right.
Every journey orchestration tool was bought 2 months ago, and almost every voice of the customer system was bought last year. So well, I think Confirmis is forced to now. Yeah. We use SurveyMonkey for our consulting company because the brains of doing a survey is in the questions that the research team is interested in. So why spend $80,000 on it when you can use a tool like SurveyMonkey for, an 1/18 of that?
Right, absolutely.
So it's all about the questions and how you roll them out, and what we find a lot of customers doing is they do a rolling set of questions so they can get more in over a period of time without overwhelming their customers, or if they have a transactional set as well as a relationship set as well as a maturity set, then you can start pulling all that data in and look at it as you go along rather than having a kind of Big Bang theory.
Yeah.
You guys know that. You're in research. I love working with research teams. More questions?
Caitlin, Jeff, do you have anything specific related to some of the work